Okay, let's determine whether the equation is linear. If so, is it increasing, decreasing, or constant? So we're going to start with 4y minus 6x equals 10. And we're going to first decide if it's linear or not. So how do you tell if it's linear? Well, linear functions tend to fit, though not always, but you can fit into y equals mx plus b. In other words, if the exponent is 1 and 1, exponent is 1 and 1, then it tends to be a linear term. So we can clearly see that these are 1 and 1, hence it is linear. So the next question is, how do we go about figuring out whether it's increasing or decreasing and where it is doing so? So what you want to do is you want to put into y equals mx plus b. So if this is minus 6x, I'm going to add 6x to both sides. So I'm going to get 4y equals 6x plus 10. And then I'm going to divide through by 4 so it get y by itself. And this would give me y equals 6 over 4x plus 10 over 4. Now, because 6 over 4 and 10 over 4 are reducible, we're going to reduce them, which means I'm going to divide both of these by 2. So 6 divided by 2 is 3, 4 divided by 2 is 2. So I'm left with y equals 3 over 2x. And do the same thing with 10. So 10 divided by 2 is 5, 4 divided by 2 is 2, plus 5 over 2. And that's the equation. So why do I want it in this form? Well, I want it in this form because this gives me the slope and the y-intercept, right? So when we look back here, and I wrote y equals mx plus b, m is the slope, and b is the y-intercept. So what's the significance of that? Well, I can graph it, or I can at least draw a sketch fairly easily, right? So I know 5 over 2 is 2.5. You don't really need to know that. You just know you have a y-intercept here. 3 over 2 means you go up 3 over 2. If you go up 3 over 2, that is a fancy way of just saying your slope is gradually going up as x increases. So what does that mean? Well, as x increases, this function gradually goes up, it means it's increasing. And there you have it. Sometimes you'll see it written as x approaches infinity, f of x approaches, well, let me write this a little bit off to the left here. So as x approaches infinity, f of x, remember f of x is y, approaches infinity, which is just a fancy way of saying, as you go to the right, what does the function do? The y values of the function tend to go up, so approaches infinity. And there you have it. Let's take a look at another one. So remember, we're deciding if it's linear or not. So because we have a squared term, this just means it's not linear. And there you have it. In C, again, you have squared terms, therefore not linear. Here, the exponents are all 1, which means that it's going to be linear. So again, here, so this is linear, right off here. And then the question is, well, then how do we get y by itself? So we're going to do the same thing. So recall, going back to the first question, how did we get y by itself? We first moved x, right? So we're going to first move x to the other side. So we're going to add 7x to both sides. And then what do we do? Well, just like before, we had a 4 next to y, so we're multiplying by 4. The opposite multiplication is division. We're going to do the same thing. Oops. We're going to divide by the number in front of y, which is negative 3. And remember, everything gets divided by negative 3. So this gives me y equals to negative 7 over 3x minus 1/3. Again, this negative 7 over 3, the number in front of x, the coefficient in front of x, is the slope. And the constant, or the number that doesn't have an x associated with it, is the y-intercept. Okay. So what does that tell me? Well, when I graph, that tells me wherever negative 1 over 3 is, we know it's under the x-axis. And if the slope is negative 7 over 3, that means the function is going to go down and to the right. So that means we're going to have, let me redraw that. We're going to have, apparently struggle with drawing straight lines. Okay, that's not that straight, but that's a straight line. Okay. Now, on this one, notice that as you go to the right, what happens to the y values? The y values drop. So what that means is that this function is decreasing. Okay? The next one, x minus 2 equals 0. Now here we have only one variable, and that is raised to the first power. So what I can do is I'm going to go ahead and add 2 to both sides just to make it clear. X equals 2. So the question is this a linear function? Well, linear means line, so it is a line, but we know whenever we have a function or we have an equation of x equals, it goes up and down. And the problem with something that goes up and down is it fails the vertical line test. The vertical line test is that if you can drop a vertical line and it touches the graph more than once, here it touches at every single point, because it is a vertical line, right? Then it fails the vertical line test. So every function like this, no matter how many times when I drop vertical lines, note they only touch once. And they will always only touch once. So if that happens, here as well we see the same effect, right? If that happens, it passes the vertical line test and it is a function. Here, it touches at every single point, right? So it fails the vertical line test. So this is not a linear function because it is not a function. Okay? Now, y equals 0, you may be tempted to say, well, hey, look, the last one, if you had one variable, that was not a function. What about this one? Well, y equals 0 is actually literally the x-axis. It is the collection of points, 1, 0, 2, 0. So it's a collection of all the points that have a y value of 0, right? Similarly, I should have made this point earlier, x equals 2 means the collection of points that have an x value of 2, right? So this one, if we test it with the vertical line test, it's pretty clear that no matter where I drop vertical lines, they're always going to touch once. So this actually does pass the vertical line test, and hence is a linear function. So what about, is it increasing or decreasing? Well, we said increasing is as you go left to right, or as x increases, the y values increase. Well, that would have to have some sort of shape like this, and that's clearly not going on. Decreasing would be going down as you go left to right, and that's not going on. So what is this? Well, when it's a horizontal line, that's a constant. Hence, this is a constant. Okay, so that's it. Hopefully that makes sense, and I'll see you in the next video.